Now that we have a functioning combo system, let's get started on the basis of the actual weapon system. So I've made a little prefab here, which has a point that's going to be the point where the weapon is held. It's just a good reference point for if I have a different kind of weapon that has to be held a different kind of way. This way I can see within the prefab where the character is going to be holding the weapon. Then we have the actual weapon model, and I've got this box collider here, which I'm going to put on the hand grip point, as I call it, itself, together with the script for the actual functionality of the sword. It's mostly a workflow related thing, because at that point I can yeet this thing entirely out of there, make a prefab out of the hand grip point, and then make all the other prefabs based on that. And then if I want to change anything about the functionality of that, I only have to change it in one place. So this is more or less a placeholder. I'm going to throw this one out and then make a separate one for the sword. Anyway, I also refactored my code for the actual combat system. First and foremost, we have a little bit of extra momentum added when we do one of these attacks, which means that it looks a lot less weird when the attacks happen. And more importantly, I rewrote this entire mess of redundant code into something that is a lot more variable. So I'm not going to go through all the details here, but just know that this function only needs the weapon name and then creates the strings for weapon attack 1, weapon attack 2. So in this case, sword attack 1, sword attack 2, sword attack 3. And at that point, we only need to make sure that the names of these nodes and the names of these variables match that. So if I have a katana attack and it has 5 animations, it'll just work in that system. All that I need to really take care of is making sure that the nodes are called katana attack 1, katana attack 2, katana attack 3, katana attack 4, and katana attack 5. Same thing with the variables here. So that's going to make broadening this system a lot easier rather than having to hard code in every single combo, because that would be tedious and very, very messy. So now I have just like 60 lines of code for all my combos rather than about 100 lines of code per combo. That all being said, let's make our weapon scripts. So first things first, obviously we're going to need a string for the weapon name. Then we also want a float for the damage the weapon can do. And we're going to put a on trigger enter. We're going to make this box collider a trigger, obviously. And we're going to make a variable, making a variable enemy that's equal to other game object, and then we check if enemy get components enemy. So this way we check whether or not the game object that this collides with, or through rather, has a enemy component. So if it doesn't, it's going to do nothing. If it does, we're going to deal damage to the enemy and knock it back a little bit. We can say enemy. And then we want to make a public. Do we want to make a function for taking damage in the enemy or in the weapon? Is the question there. Probably within the enemy, because otherwise the weapon... Oh, good question, good question. Before we decide that though, we actually need a variable enemy HP. So let's make a float enemy HP. And set it by default equal to 100. Let's make the function in the enemy here. So public void damage enemy, which will take in an int, well actually no, a float damage, and also a transform for the player, because we're going to need to give it knockback, and for that we're going to need to know relatively where the player is to generate a force to knock it away from the player. So the first bit here is easy, and that is enemy HP minus equals damage. Then if enemy HP is less than 0, less than or equal to 0 actually. And let's for this also make a void kill enemy. For now, that void kill enemy function is going to just delete the game object. So destroy game object. But eventually things like loot tables and stuff will be calculated within this function as well. So might as well just make that function now. So we can kill enemy. Otherwise, we want to, and this is very important because this means that actually, this is going to make things significantly more complex for the enemies, isn't it? Because every enemy is also going to need a rigid body, because we're going to need to be able to knock it back. We have a prototype enemy over here, so we're just going to give him a rigid body. He already has his box collider, obviously. And a navmesh agent. We'll get to that eventually, I'm sure. But for now, let's give him a rigid body. Okay, that then adds a rigid body. I don't know why it thinks we want a rigid body 2D, which we'll call RB. And at start, we say that RB is equal to get component rigid body, as usual. RB velocity equals, and now we get something fun. We're going to set this to vector 30 just so that it stops moving, and then we're actually going to, I think, add a force, which will be player dot forward. We can just like say ×5, and I think so. What this should do is it should stop the rigid body from moving if it was moving before, and then add force to it in the forward direction for the player with a power of 5. And then if we hit it again, it'll first get reset back to 0 before adding that force again, so it doesn't stack. That was the thing I was worried about there for a sec. So now we can finish this off here with enemy damage enemy, and it'll obviously deal damage equal to damage. And the transform, we need to get the transform from the player as well, don't we? Yeah, that's the thing. So we want to make a transform, just going to call it trans. I think this is the safest way to do things. And now if I start attacking our enemy, it should get knocked back. So let's see. If we attack you, which definitely does not seem to work because you are out of my reach, which is honestly, that is a concern. I don't think this is going to do much, but we're going to change this to vector 3 like ×5 as well, so that first moves up a little bit before the other force gets applied. Because what I think might be happening here is the fact that it's still on the ground is then immediately slowing the little bit of movement, like knockback movement, that I have. No, it's just not working. That probably would be why. The hitbox of it is all the way out the front there. How does that happen? Okay, with that all fixed, it works. The issue is that it also works by... We can attack things by just walking into them. Probably should fix that, but and it definitely seems to be the case that first and foremost, I'm probably getting damaged attacking this thing. I need my weapon to know when it's like active, because I don't want this to work, right? Because just standing here and killing this enemy like this is kind of really fucking cheap. And at the moment, this is entirely possible. So we need probably in player combat, I'm going to put these. We're going to put public bool iframes and a public bool attacking. The attacking one, relatively easy, because we can just set these attacking equals true in this, and then we can set attacking equals false in this bit of the code, and that's the attacking done with. So we're going to change this transform to being a game object, and we're going to be calling it player. And the reason we're doing that is because we're going to need to access multiple things here from this player. Because the weapon is also going to need a reference to the player combat. And then obviously the transform, which we could just take out of, actually, you could just say player transform, I think. So we don't need a variable for that one. And then we can check whether or not when we're attacking combat, attacking is true. And if it's not true, we don't do the damage enemy thing. So now it's only going to actually deal the damage and do the attacking when we are attacking. I just realized that we probably should check that within the enemy, because the enemy is also going to need that same information for dealing damage to the player, which is not done through the weapon. So let's just change player stats here to another game object player and remove this bit, make this a lowercase p, and then player HP can be gotten from that. Yes. So now we can get a player combat as well, which we'll call combat, and that way we're getting the same variable again. Which this might not be the most efficient way of doing it. It's the way I'm going to do it for right now. That should give me the iframes I need for the combat to actually work fine. Okay, there's definitely something that doesn't work there. Oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. We need in the combat player get component combat. Forgot about that one little line, and now everything should work. Okay, now everything works, and I can attack, and I can not see my damage. Hold on. Or my HP rather. Okay, I can see my HP again. Walking into it I get damaged, but attacking it I do not. Obviously I don't think my weapon is doing damage at the moment. So let's set that to 10. Yeah, so with the enemy AI, there's obviously not just going to be immediate damage when you touch them. That means that our combat system is really shaping up to be something quite nice. So let's just pick up these just so that I don't damage myself. And there we go. That's fantastic. I think it's time to start making some AI.